Hi class, this is JilMac, and I'm the instructor for the Community College of Vermont, and we are going over web development, assignment 13, and we are going to be looking at, as I scroll down, adding JavaScript. Now JavaScript is huge, and there's so many different components of it, but first let's go over what we have from the textbook in adding JavaScript. So let's open this up. And here we are working with scripts. Now notice this at the beginning. This says, note, you won't gain much from viewing these pages in a browser. Their value is in the HTML code and comments. And in particular, I've included comments in load before the body and load after the body about why the code is in the latter preferred from the standpoint of organizing your JavaScript files. Now, let's go over this and I'll kind of talk to you about stuff. So here is the first example. So when we click on it, it basically doesn't do much of anything. And if we view the page source, this is telling us, okay, here's the header information, and we are going to link to a style sheet. We have our body information, and notice this body isn't closing it. This body is just part of this whole big long comment. And we are going to be opening some JavaScript. However, this JavaScript, when you click on this file, JavaScript, it basically says your scripts go here. So there's nothing in this JavaScript. It's all just shells. When you look at this global CSS, the global CSS isn't anything either. It's just a CSS file that says put your CSS here. So this is really just a shell. It's a shell to say, listen, if I want to have a style sheet up in the header, and in my body I want to have, I've got a couple of paragraphs here that display, which is true, that's what it displays. We got a whole bunch of comments and then says, okay, you're going to put some JavaScript in the body. And that's what it is. You're going to load before the body. So in this particular example, if we had JavaScript in there, we are going to load the body first and then we are going to load the JavaScript. And this all has to do with, load testing and how does your web page work. So this is the JavaScript loads after the body. Okay, so let's close up these and go back to this example. Oops, we want this one. We're going to go back and we're going to look at the next one. Load before the body tag subfolder. So if we look at this one, once again, there isn't anything to look at. It's just a shell. We're going to view the source. Here up in the header, all we're loading is a style sheet. And here in the body, we have a paragraph, and then we have another paragraph. And here we are calling a script, but it's not a script, it's an external file. This is an external file where the first example, if we go to this external file, the external file just says your JavaScript goes here. But instead of it being included in it, it is an external file. And those external files are important because you could use this JavaScript over and over and over again without having redundant code inside each one of your web pages. And that way, if you needed to ever change this file, you would only have to change one file and it would change across every single web page that used that file. Versus if you put some JavaScript right in the body, every file that you want that JavaScript behavior to change, you have to edit that file. So that just gives you a lot of redundant code, and it's just a maintenance nightmare. So that's what it's showing you here. And that's what each of these are showing us. Each of these are showing us different ways that JavaScript can be included in a program. Here we have load in the header. So when we do our view source, we see that we have this external file, JavaScript file, and it's loaded in the header. It's loaded up here in between the head tags. So that JavaScript is loaded up in the header. Once again, behavior JavaScript, there's nothing in that file. It's just showing you different ways and places that you could see JavaScript in a program. So that was, here's sample JavaScript. If you look at this sample JavaScript, here this shows you, okay, I can comment my JavaScript. My JavaScript can have functions. Inside those functions, I can also comment. Notice how the comment, they're using a little different comment tag. We're seeing that JavaScript can have an if statement, which makes it very powerful. That it can have variables, and you can assign true and false values to a variable. It can check for different browser types. If your browser type is IE, then we want you to do something different. And that's kind of what some JavaScript looks like. Now it's nearly identical to what we saw in Chapter 6. So in Chapter 6 we were starting to use some JavaScript. And here is some JavaScript, what it looks like minified. Remember, a lot of times minified means we're taking out any of the comments, we're taking out all the spaces and carriage returns that we don't need. We're making this code as small as possible because we are now, you know, a lot of us are on mobile networks and that data charge is big. Plus the time it takes to download. And you don't know what your speed is going to be. It's going to be dependent on where you physically are. So that's what JavaScript looks like minified. Here's another example of where we can embed a tag. So I'm going to view the source. And here we have our style sheet up in our header, but nothing else. And here we can just put your JavaScript right in. So you can put that script in, and we have script tags. So with this script tag, this means that you're using JavaScript internally. And that's what that is. And here it's embedded in the header. So if we right click it and we view the page source, here our script is not down in the body, but it's up inside the header and it looks the same. So why all this huge discussion about where JavaScript is and where does it go? And that's what we're talking about in Chapter 19. Now, I've had different user group meetings where we've discussed JavaScript, and you know, it's like, where do you put a kitchen in the house and where do you put a mudroom in the house? It depends on how you use your house and your family. Where you put your JavaScript in an HTML program is dependent on what that JavaScript is doing. So it all depends. And you're going to see it in a lot of different places when you're looking at different code. So where do we find some JavaScript? You know, where are we going to find some JavaScript? So if we go out to our ST-Web, so let's just go out to ST-Web. And we're going to go into our course, which is 1151. And we're going to look in mine, the teachers, which is JAM. And let's make this a little bit bigger. We're going to look in assignment 13 because you can all FTP to this. And in assignment 13, I've got lots of different JavaScript. You know, here I have chapters 18 and 19, but I have calculator and image and New Boston and Star Wars and tic-tac-toe. So let's look at some JavaScript that you can use as your before and after examples. Here's calculator. Calculator has an external CSS, an external JavaScript, and here's the HTML. Now the big thing to know about JavaScript is that it can't just run by itself. If you clicked a JavaScript piece of code, if we go back and you clicked a JavaScript piece of code, all you would see is code. Because JavaScript cannot run unless you wrap HTML around it. The same is true with CSS. CSS can't run. You can't just run this. You have to wrap HTML around it. in order for it to run. So here is this calculator, and we can say 8 times 9 equals 72. And if we look at our view page, we're going to see that the header is a little bit more involved because I have the JavaScript inside the header, this calculator.javascript file. In the body, I create a table. Imagine that. We're studying tables, and a lot of times a table is going to be associated with some JavaScript, or it could be that it's going to be associated with a form of some type. And then you are going to run it, and you're going to calculate it. And that is how you invoke doing the calculations on this. Now, I don't expect you to change a whole lot of this, but you might want to change the colors. You might want to change something up in the, right here I don't have an external style sheet, but you might want to put it in because our styling is in there. But, or you might just want to include a calculator on your web page. So that is calculator. The next example is image coordinates. And image coordinates, here I've got a JPEG. And when you look at this JPEG, this is a JPEG of my son's team of horses. And here is coordinates. So when I look at this, this is a little program that if I want to click on this leg of this animal, it's going to give me the coordinates of where that leg is. If I want to click on this leg, it gives me another set of coordinates. Now, why would I need those coordinates? Well, here's our coordinates JPEG. Here is another. This is just an image. So here's a couple of images that you can use this coordinates HTML. And when you view the source for this page, it's giving you some JavaScript up in the header. And the JavaScript is when you point to a certain spot on the image that it is going to display it in this form. Okay, so the form is used to display information, not to enter information, and it's going to display the information that the JavaScript sends to it. So you might want to add a smaller picture, that makes it a little bit easier, and then find the XY coordinates of that graphic. So that's what that image coordinator is. I just want to click on Star Wars, because Star Wars, you have some HTML here, and then you have this WOOF file. And you have what's called a README text. Now, in the README text, this tells you a little bit about what's going on. JilMac teaches web dev, and some of the possible things that you can do to get it to run on your server. You can change the color background, you can change what it says. So this is the README text that you have a font face here that maybe you want to change the font face. And so if you move these WOOF files are what determines the different fonts. Okay, so you have a font face, and then that font face is finding it out there on Google Themes, and it's grabbing some of these graphics, some of these fonts. So what is a font file and what is a WOOF file? A WOOF is an web open font format, sort of like when you were getting different fonts. This one has fonts in it. So that's the README file. Let's look at the Star Wars crawling titles after. Well, what does it do? Hey, short time ago, Star Wars titles. In this episode, A New Hope for CSS3. It's a period of vendor war. And you have all of this text scrolling. So let's view the page source. Here's the page source. Up in the header, you have this style sheet. Okay? And the style sheet is up here so that, I don't know, we can kind of keep it all together. But this is all the styles. Up in the header, we have the body. We have the header Star Wars. And then we have episode for A New Hope. And notice how that's got a P class and it's centered. And we can get away with centered. There's a good one. because it's in a class. Now here, this is a period of vendor war. This is the text for what it says. You could change the text on this, you know. So you could change the text. You really wouldn't, you might try to change the style, but you're probably not going to, and there is no JavaScript in this. This whole thing is just part of CSS3 and some of the different things that we can do, but there is no JavaScript. And how do I know? Because I can search and I can find, and I want to look for something called script. See, there's no JavaScript required, and that's all it says. So there's only one instance of script, and it's just saying there's no JavaScript. So it's kind of fun, you know, we're studying JavaScript, but it's kind of fun to see things that move around that are now part of the CSS3, and they don't need JavaScript. So for those CSS3 people, that's fun. We also have tic-tac-toe. Here's tic-tac-toe. Tic-tac-toe, and when you click on it, and now it says, hey, X1. So you can, would you like to play again? Sure. So you're going to replay this. Well, how is this created? Let's look at the view source. So up here we have a script. Here's the JavaScript for this tic-tac-toe game. Okay? And in the body, we're using Canvas. And the reason that we're using Canvas rather than a table is, let's go back to this, is that Canvas will, maybe I can make it bigger. Canvas wraps, okay? Canvas wraps. When you do a table, tables don't wrap. That's why you see some of my work on my assignments used to be in tables, but as I'm moving, as I'm getting to classes and getting time, I'm changing all of that table format, which is great for computers. But it's not really all that great for phones and tablets. You know, so if we wanted to, we could even, of course, you have to kind of look at this. Here's a tic-tac-toe thing that, okay, it's great while you scroll, but this is going to be a hard game to play. You have to kind of remember where everything is. Oh, okay, great. You know, this shows you that, you know, X1. But it's not really our kind of traditional tic-tac-toe. So, but the reason that we're using this, and the reason that we're looking at this, is because we are using Canvas. And Canvas gives you that table-like thing, only it wraps. When you look at the assignments, some of these assignments, now let me go to a class that here's, let me go down to my PHP class. So here's my PHP class. And let's go to assignments. And in the assignments, oh, okay, so I did change that. So what haven't I changed? I've changed them all in web dev. I've changed them all in the PHP class, but here is my JavaScript class. And if I go to assignments in there, I think my JavaScript class, I'm still in the process of doing that. Let me just close some of these windows. Yes. So here I have some assignments, but then I have a table. So here I have my assignments, and now I have a table. Now if I look at this table on a phone or a tablet, as I'm wrapping, I'm cutting things off in that table. I have to scroll over to see things. Oops, come on. Let's see how far it goes. You know, so here, I can't see all of the table. In order to see the table, even the scrolling doesn't work. You know, the only thing that works when you're looking at a table like that is to make it smaller. So that's the reason that tables is a good way to display data, and it's great on computers when you have a big screen, but it's not so great on phones or tablets, and that's why using Canvas is a nicer idea. So let's go back to our web dev for assignment 13 and scroll down. Oops. And now I've made it so big to, let me make it smaller again. And let me go back to assignment 13. Okay. And there's also the New Boston. New Boston has different examples. Here's example 1 where you can drag me. Okay. And when you right click and view this page source on this, you see that we are using a script, and the script that we're using is jQuery. And jQuery also has a jQuery user interface, and that jQuery user interface is what allows you to drag me. Let's look at another example. Here's click in the box to see a calendar. So when I click in the box, I bring up a calendar. And when we right click and view page source, here I'm using jQuery also. All right, let's look at another example. Here's another example 3. Here I can resize this box. So resizing that box, when I view the source, what am I doing? I'm using script from jQuery. And I happen to have, I believe that I have jQuery, and I'm also, that jQuery is interfacing with style sheet, and the style sheet is also a jQuery custom style sheet. So there's another one. 3. When we look at them. Now notice how I have jQuery. I have the jQuery that these files are using. And this jQuery is from September 2011. So the newer jQueries have really changed a lot. If you go into the JavaScript subdirectory, here is where I have this jQuery user interface. Once again, from 2011. So the new jQuery user interface is going to be a very different version. It's not going to be 1.8.16. When you're developing your pages, you have to decide, do I leave the JavaScript on a good JavaScript server, and so when it's updated, my page will be updated, or when something changes, I will have those changes, or do I copy it and put it on my server? It's all open source, you can do that, and usually do a mixture of both. So I don't know if those would work with the newest jQueries. But jQuery is a library, and there are many libraries that enhance JavaScript. So those are some of the examples that you can use out on assignment 13 to kind of use some jQuery and JavaScript to go along with chapter 18 or 19. Excellent. Well, have a wonderful week, and I'll talk with you later.